Harry the Horse Barbecue.
Smack your butt. What's up, everyone? Welcome to Harry the Horse Barbecue. Today we're going to be cooking up a pork butt. Now, commonly referred to as a pork butt, it's really coming from the shoulder part of the pig. Sometimes called a Boston butt, pork shoulder, all those things. They're all synonymous, all mean the same thing. But it's coming from the shoulder part of the pig. So what we have here is bone in. Bone in is very important. If you want to get a look at the bone we got here, the shoulder blade. The shoulder blade right here running through. That's important, that's going to add flavor, and it's almost like an internal thermometer too. You know this thing is done when that bone kind of pulls out pretty clean. Okay? So what we're going to do, we're going to trim this guy up. We got a large fat cap on the top here. We're going to trim off some of this fat. This fat is going to kind of prevent any kind of smoke flavor from penetrating the meat. We do want to keep a little bit of fat because we do want it to render down and keep our pork nice and moist. Okay? So I'm going to get in here. You can see how thick of a piece of fat we have running right here. All of that's not going to render. So we're going to take this guy off. We're going to trim it up, and then we'll get to seasoning. So, as I'm trimming this has been sitting on the counter for, I'd say 15-20 minutes. You kind of want to work quickly because the fat starts to warm up, which makes it a little more difficult to cut. So when you're trimming this, try and do it when it's kind of cold, so that way the fat is more like congealed and it's easier to trim this stuff off. You just don't want to cut yourself. You see how I trim this up? This fat is pretty thin and white, but over here, this is part of that layer of the fat that was on top still. You can see how it's kind of like starting to change color as opposed to the fresh fat underneath. So we want to get rid of any of that stuff. We don't want anything on here that we don't want to eat. You can see the outside of this meat and the outside of the one I just cut. Maybe we'll do the same thing. Just take a little slice off here, just to expose some of the fresher meat underneath. So we got this guy trimmed up. We left a little bit of fat on the top. We do want fat to render and keep the pork butt moist throughout the cook. But what we're going to do now, a lot of people will take these kinds of cuts of meat, ribs, pork butt, they'll slather them with mustard as like a binder for the seasoning to stick. One, I don't have mustard today, but I also don't want to do that today for this cook. We're smoking on the PK today. I'm trying to keep things as simple as possible just to test out the smoking quality of the PK. So what we're going to do is I'm going to take some kosher salt and sprinkle kosher salt all the way around the pork butt and just let it sit for maybe 10 to 15 minutes while we get the PK nice and hot. That allows some of the moisture to be pulled out of the pork butt. And what that's going to do, that moisture is going to allow the rest of our seasonings to stick. So we'll run with that right now. We got kosher salt right here, so we can go all the way around the pork butt. Alright, so we got kosher salt all over this. We're going to let it sit for maybe 10-15 minutes. Let that moisture pull out. We're going to do this real simple too. We're almost doing like a Texas style pork butt. Hit it with some kosher salt. We're going to hit it with some coarse ground black pepper after that. And then we do want a little sweetness on this guy. I do have this Georgia Boys all-purpose barbecue rub. Picked this up from Savory Spice. Savory Spice has got a lot of good individual spices, as well as some different blends, like barbecue blends and stuff like that. So we'll try this guy out. We'll give this a light coat afterwards and see how this tastes on the pork butt. Pork butt. Slapped your butt. We'll see how that tastes on the pork butt. For now, we're going to go outside, get the PK rolling, get it nice and hot for the pork butt. So, we're out at the PK. This is going to be our first long cook on the PK. We're testing it out with indirect heat. We're going to do some indirect cooking. We're going to try and smoke the pork butt and see how it turns out. We don't have a traditional smoker here yet, but this is a good way, or a good alternative to that. So what I'm gonna do, we got this charcoal of lump charcoal all ready to go. I'm gonna add one big chunk of apple wood. I got a big chunk of pecan here. So we're gonna roll with apple and pecan for as long as we can. We're running low on pecan, but we'll get it in as much as we can. But what I'm gonna do is take this charcoal, throw it on top of my wood. So I know my wood is gonna get nice and hot. And you can see we're already combusting into flames here. I'm gonna add another piece of apple wood right on top. We do want to get the smoke rolling pretty well for this pork butt. Let's move this out of the way. So what we're gonna do, we're gonna check this maybe about every 30 minutes, and I want to keep adding about maybe 2 pieces of wood every about 30 minutes to make sure we really get that smoke flavor going on the pork butt. One other thing, guys, we're gonna set this up for smoking, and the way PK kind of instructs you to do that is wherever your fire is. So my charcoal and my fire is right here on this side. The vent underneath that, all the way down here, I'm keeping it wide open. I want the airflow to come up and keep my fire hot throughout the cook. But as that heat travels up, we don't want to lose all the smoke coming out the top here. We want the smoke to roll over our meat, which will be on the other side of the PK. So I'm going to close this vent completely. But also down here, we don't want to lose any of the heat or the smoke coming out the bottom here. So I'm going to close my vent over my meat. So I have open, closed, closed, open. This way the air flows up this way, over our meat and out the top. Okay? So that's what we're going to roll with. Let's get this guy nice and hot and get the pork butt on. This pork butt's been sitting with the salt on it for about 10 minutes. We got the PK rolling, getting nice and hot. So we're gonna get some coarse black pepper on this, and then we'll get that Georgia Boys all-purpose rub on there, and then we'll throw it right on the smoker. All right, so you guys can kind of see where I haven't put any black pepper yet. You can see there's still some salt on the surface, but it's definitely dissolving. If you ever put salt in water, salt is just sodium and chloride, right? And that little molecule will dissolve when it gets into water. So what's happening is when that NaCl is getting into the meat, the moisture is sort of making that salt crystal or that salt molecule dissolve down, and it's almost becoming like salt water, which is kind of penetrating the meat, so we'll get some good penetration of flavor deep into the pork butt, and that's the idea here. The pork butt's all seasoned up. My goal here is bark. I really want to build a nice bark, a nice crust on the outside of the meat. If you've ever gone to a barbecue restaurant and got pulled pork and it's kind of just like, maybe you get it from the interior, but sometimes there's just pulled pork drenched in sauce, kind of slimy. I really want the texture of the bark, so hopefully this seasoning will give us that, plus the smoke rolling. Let's get it on. One important thing when we're doing this, we want to keep the pork butt as moist as possible. So I've added a water pan in here, just a regular aluminum pan. I've added a little bit of water to it, but I always like to add a little bit of apple juice. I think the sugars kind of contribute to the flavor a little bit. We're running apple wood anyway, so I think it couldn't hurt the flavor of the pork butt, so we'll add some of that right in, about a 50-50 mix or so of water and apple juice, okay? What I'm also going to do is I'm going to fill a spray bottle with some apple juice, some apple cider vinegar, and a little bit of water. I will be spritzing the pork butt every about 30 to 45 minutes, depending on the bark formation, but we'll take you along for that. I'm going to take one more chunk of apple just because we're about to throw this guy on. And notice I've got the latch here on the charcoal side so I can add fuel pretty simply throughout the cook. I always want to get the wood kind of started. I wanted to get it started to combust into flames, so I know that the smoke will be rolling pretty well. One thing to note, pork butt's on. I've oriented this side towards the fire. You can see our fire and our meat are very close together. We'll check the bark formation, see if anything's burning. We will likely rotate the pork butt during the cook, just so we get even cooking throughout the duration of the cook. So, close this guy up. Check on it a little bit. See you guys then. Alright, so it's been about an hour that the pork butt's been on the PK. You can see the smoke is rolling pretty nicely. It is a little kind of white, which is fine. That's kind of what you get when you're smoldering the wood over the charcoal embers. But let's take a look and see what we got going. Yeah, right after an hour, see we got some nice bark starting to form. Great color on this, but it's getting a little dark after an hour. You can see where you got some pooling up right here. That's where that fat is being rendered out. And one thing I forgot to mention is I put this on fat side up. I'm a firm believer that the fat will definitely drip down due to gravity as the cook goes on. So, you can see we're getting a little dark by the fire here. I think I'm going to rotate this also, and then we'll close it up and keep it going. And all I'm spraying with here is just about a third, just ratios about a third water, 1/3 apple juice, and 1/3 apple cider vinegar. I like the apple juice aspect because it kind of will add some sugar to the pork. Pork likes sweetness, and it'll sort of caramelize on top, making a nice crust. All right, guys, so the pork shoulder has been on for about a little over 2 hours, maybe 2 hours, 15 minutes. Every about 30 minutes or so, I've come out and I've taken two pieces of wood, threw them on the coals, and I sprayed the shoulder down with some apple cider vinegar, some water, and some apple juice. That mixture I showed you guys earlier. So we're gonna take a look now and show you that process again. So we can see here this very nice bark that's forming. It's not burnt on the outside, it's just the caramelization of those sugars and the rub from the apple juice, those things, but nothing's really burning. I'm a little concerned about some of the edges here, but we'll spray those down. You can see some nice fat rendering here. You can see as I push down, that juice just squeezes out. That's exactly what we want to see. We want that fat to render down and keep the rest of this pork shoulder nice and moist. A chunk of apple wood, another tinier chunk of apple wood. Primarily want to run apple on this, and a little chunk of pecan. We'll throw those on. I might throw another tinier piece in there. We want to get these guys going. All right, we'll close her up. And we'll probably repeat the same process within the next half hour or so. I'm guessing that maybe within the next hour, and you can see the smoke starting to roll already, maybe in the next hour or so, maybe at the 3.5 hour mark, we really might be starting to wrap here because that bark formation on the outside is really, really nice and we don't want it to burn. We want to finish off the cooking process because the pork's not completely cooked yet. So we'll bring you guys back next time we spray when we get ready to wrap. All right, guys, we're about 3.5 hours into the cook, and one thing you'll notice is that there's no thermometer on the PK. It's something you can modify and add. I didn't get a chance to do that. It's important to know the ambient air of the inside of your chamber so you know how hot you're running your fire. This is kind of tough because it is such a small cooker, but I did stick my Thermapen in. We were climbing over 300 degrees. It's a little hot for where I want to be. But we're just gonna roll with it. So let's check out the pork butt we got going, and you can see some nice bubbling away, good bark forming, and I think this is as dark as I want to get on this pork butt. What we're gonna do is spritz it down. This is a little bit difficult because we are so close to the fire here. Okay, so the heat's not traveling that far, which is why this barked up pretty quick. 3.5 hours in, we got a pretty good bark going. Yeah, I think now's a good time to wrap, and we'll add some more fuel to the fire, and we'll throw it back on. We'll show you the wrapping process. I'm gonna wrap in butcher paper. I know a lot of people wrap pork in aluminum foil. I just want to preserve the bark here. I think the bark is a real important part to pulled pork, which is what we're gonna make out of this. So we're gonna wrap it up in butcher paper. We're gonna throw it right back on. Try and maintain that around that 300 temperature. If we could drop it down a bit to maybe 275, that'd be great. But we're gonna go inside, wrap it, and we'll show you that process. Alright, so we're inside. We're going to get wrapping this pork shoulder here. But the thing is, I don't wrap based on the internal temperature. I haven't probed this thing once. Because I can feel that it's still tight, and we need to cook it more just indirectly and off of the smoke. And I've built a bark to the point where I'm okay with it. I don't want to cook it anymore with it being exposed to the smoke. I'm wrapping based on the outside texture and the outside bark that I see. This is dark to the point where I want it. So now we're going to spray it down. We're going to wrap it up. We're going to finish the cooking wrapped in the butcher paper, so that way it kind of almost steams a little bit, and we'll get that nice tender pork that we're looking for in the end. So we'll spray this guy down. We'll try and wrap this guy up. So all I did was lay out 2 sheets of butcher paper, fold it over again. This might actually work where I can just do a triangle fold pretty easily. Then roll it over one more time. That way it's kind of nice and packaged. This is still fat side up. That's how I still want to cook it. I'm going to throw this back on the cooker. Keep it going for the next few hours. Slap your butts. Alright guys, so we're about 5 hours or so into this cook, and I've set up my chef alarm here. And you can see, and I'll show you where I probed it in a second. You can see we're temping out at about 184 just about right now. And we have that target temperature set for about 202. That's what we're looking for, so this thing will let me know once we reach that temperature. So we've got about just a shade under 20 degrees to go, or about 20 degrees to go. So that might take us maybe 2 more hours or so. That's my guess. But we'll take a look on the inside. See right around the probe, that's probably where that fat cap was, or just about is. You can see how I stuck the probe in there. Kind of just in the center. I try to reach about the fattiest part, the thickest part. The meat comes to about here and here. Just try to eyeball it, no big deal. Once we get closer in temperature, we can take the Thermapen and start probing throughout just to make sure it's soft, make sure we're about 202 all the way through. But all we're gonna do now, checking the temp, I'm just gonna add a little more fuel to the fire, and that's about it. Since we are cooking so close to the fire, I am going to rotate the whole pork shoulder, just so even though it's in the paper and being protected, we can get sort of even heat distribution on either side. 203.5, right around our target temperature of 203, that's perfect. We are going to verify with the Thermapen. We're going to check a few different places in the pork butt just to make sure it's about the same temperature throughout, so let's give it a look. 201. And I just poke right through the butcher paper. Creates a small hole. 198-ish. It's a little low. I think this end is the slightly fatter end. 202, 203. Let's try one more spot, maybe kind of in the middle here. 204. I think we're right on it. I think we're gonna pull this guy. You see the chef alarm and the Thermapen pretty much both reading the same, so I'm going to pull the chef alarm probe out. Move these guys. We're just going to transfer this to a foil pan. We're going to let this pork butt rest for anywhere between 30 minutes to an hour, somewhere around there. And then we'll start tearing into it, and we'll show you guys what that looks like. But we'll bring you back for the beans in a little bit. Alright guys, so we're back here. We took the pork butt off and we got some baked beans going. Kind of a friend's recipe that I kind of tweaked a little bit. Just a few different cans of beans, some brown sugar, some barbecue sauce, a little bit of ketchup, things like that. If you guys want to know the recipe, let me know in the comment section. I'll definitely put it out there. But I baked them in the oven already for an hour and a half. And you can see we got this fire roaring. And I want to close this up so this side doesn't get too hot. I'll probably rotate the beans in between maybe in the next 30 to 45 minutes, just so we're not burning up on this side, but we just want to get some smoke flavor on them for maybe another hour or so. All right guys, so total cook time on this pork butt was maybe about 7.5 hours. We've let it rest for an easy hour 15, hour 20, something like that. We got dogs running around, it's all good. It's all good. So we're going to unwrap this pork butt, see how we did. So what I'm gonna do, I'm gonna transfer this. Oh man, can we just get a close-up? Can we just appreciate this for a minute? I am very pleased with how this feels right now. Hopefully it's gonna taste as good as it looks. I'm gonna transfer this over to this aluminum pan. This actually, guys, this butcher paper, and I know I got a little sloppy over here. This butcher paper, if you're running an offset smoker, the grease that's in this would be a great fire starter for you. So definitely save these. If you're running an offset out there, it's a great thing to save. Help you let your fire right up. I don't have an offset quite yet, so I'm gonna toss this guy. See, that's clean off of there. You can just take a look at this. You could see a little bit of smoke penetration on there, the pink in here. It's looking good, it's smelling great. This whole piece just kind of wants to come off. Oh man, just look at this, guys. It's just tearing apart. Super easy. It's gonna make some nice sandwiches. Not too much of a smoke ring on here. We could see a little bit of smoke penetration here. That's pretty nice right there. But overall, throughout the entire pork butt, I'd say we got a little bit of smoke penetration throughout. That's good, but you know, a smoke ring doesn't tell the entire story. The main thing is how it tastes, okay? I think that was the only part of the shoulder blade that was in this cut. Remember, I got this from a butcher, right? Barb's Butchery. And that seems to be the only part of the blade they left in there. Which is all right. But, what do you say? We get to pull in this thing? Let's pull it apart. See what we got going. I'm just gonna do this with my hands. I like it sort of coarse and chunky pulled pork. I don't like that mushy pulled pork. Oh yeah. You see, we could just pull this apart. No resistance whatsoever. Got that nice fat cap in there, locking in some of that flavor. Again, some smoke penetration. Pretty happy with that. Still nice and hot. I thought it was gonna get a little cold from the long rest. But man, guys, this is looking nice. There's big chunks coming out. Look at that. Some nice smoke penetration. Pretty pleased with that. Because, you know, running on these charcoal grills, you don't get quite the smoke penetration from burning wood chunks that you would with an offset smoker. Just look at that. Oh man, can't wait to get me a bite of this. We don't need to pull this whole thing before I need to get into it, because I don't know how much longer I can wait. See if we can find something in here for me. How about this guy? This guy looks good. We got a nice bark on the outside there. You see that? With a nice moist pork in there. You could see, look at all the grease on my gloves, all that juice. Ooh. Abby's looking at me like she wants some. Right, Ab? Yeah, she wants some. Let's see how we did. Ooh. Dude! You try this. You gotta feed the cameraman.
Yo! You definitely
man.
taste the smoke for sure.
Definitely tasting the smoke. Guys, oh man, you gotta try this recipe at home. This is unreal right now.
It just falls apart in your mouth.
I am so pleased with this. Remember, we ran it on the PK.
Oh my god.
Even if you got a charcoal grill at home, you could do the same thing. It doesn't have to be on a PK. You got an offset smoker, that's even better. Oh man, this came out ridiculous. Still some of this fat here, and you know what I'm gonna do? I'm gonna tear this up. That fat, a lot of it rendered down. You could see right where I pulled off the top, not much of that fat left over. That's the fat there. You can see this is where the meat begins. But you want to mix that fat in with all of this delicious pork. That way you're getting, you know, that nice rendered fat with a lot of the bites through here.
Oh my god.
Nice bark in
so
there.
Good.
That bark formation, I think we pulled it and we wrapped it just in time too. We got great bark on there. I think the butcher paper, honestly, is the way to go here. We preserved that bark. We kept it nice and juicy. I know people like to wrap with foil, especially with pork. But man, that's hard to beat, guys. That is hard to beat. Oh man. Guys, this is just unbelievable. This bark, whew. But this is what's for dinner tonight, guys. You gotta try this recipe. Super simple, salt, pepper. We just had a basic, you know, sweet rub that we threw on there. You can use any sweet rub you like. Or even you can just go salt and pepper, whatever you like to do. Just threw it on the PK, ran some pecan wood, some apple wood. Mom's getting in the mix. Mama's getting in the mix. We ran some pecan wood, some apple wood, threw some chunks on there about every 30 minutes or so. Every time we put new wood in, we spritzed with that apple juice, apple cider vinegar, and that water mixture. We rotated the pork about every hour or so it didn't get too crusty on one side. Put that water pan in there with the apple juice and the water, and just let it roll, man. After about 3.5 hours, Mama's doing the happy dance. After about 3.5 hours of smoke rolling on this, we wrapped it up in butcher paper, let it sit. We took it for another about 3.5 hours or so, took it off. It was probing at about 202, and man, we came out with an awesome result here. So we threw these beans on. I threw them in the oven for about 1.5 hours and let them go. And we threw them back on the smoker just to get some smoke flavor on them for about another hour or so. We rotated the pans. You can see how dark they look from the smoke, but nothing's really burnt. There's just that caramelization of all the sugars in there. We're gonna try these out as well. So thank you guys for tuning in to Harry the Horse Barbecue. Remember to like, comment, subscribe, all those things. And until next time, guys, keep on grilling out there and show us what you got. We're gonna get some of this tonight for dinner. That's what I'm talking about.